Hey guys, it's Nicholas here from upgradeToLife.com, and in this video we're going to talk about the law of assumption, and in more detail we're going to talk about the three fundamentals of this law and how you can apply them so that it becomes easier for you to understand and that you actually get results. And most important, that you understand this law from a bigger perspective, from a bigger point of view, and you don't just get some new gimmick here and there, but you really in more detail and greater detail understand the law, because that will eventually enable you, like I said, to achieve your goals in a better way and to manifest your goals way more easy. So with that, I would say let's just jump in and talk about those three fundamentals and how you can apply them. So what are the three main steps? Right, what are those fundamentals? Let's uncover them and then talk about them in more detail. So fundamental one is called self-observation. Super crucial. This is not on accident, the first fundamental, right? This is really the first step when we want to achieve changes in our lives. We first need to be more self-aware. We first need to realize that our internal world is the cause for what we experience and how we experience our external world, right? So self-observation, very crucial, and I'm going to explain you how you can do that. And then step 2 is called definition of fame, right? Which means we really want to get clear on what it is that we actually want to achieve. We cannot just sit there and think, oh yeah, I just let my life come to me. No, this is like the old way of living life. I mean, obviously, yes, things unfold very effortlessly when we just also allow, when we just live in a state and in the present moment. Yes, that's true. But also, the more clear you are, the more clearer your intentions are, the more clearer your goals are, the more easier it will be for you to manifest exactly them. And step 3 is called detachment. And many people, again, they misunderstand this. I will link a video above which is called letting go, right? People think they need to then forget what it is that they desire, forget their goal, right? They have to choose another goal or any kind of bullshit stories like that. So if you haven't checked this video out, I will link it above again. It's called letting go. And those three things combined, right? Those are the three fundamentals of this law of assumption. And now let's dive a little bit deeper into it so that we actually learn how we can use those three steps and what they actually mean. And let's start with self-observation. So the starting point of true metaphysics, right? Because this law of assumption is based on metaphysical teachings from Neville Goddard. And by the way, many people think that Neville came up with an own teaching, but really what he did is he just referred to ancient teachings and interpreted them in the right way to help people achieve their goals also. But all this stuff actually is thousands of years old. It just wasn't misunderstood by people and was false interpreted, and people created outer gods out of the stuff, right? And think that there is an outside entity controlling them, but all of the stuff was bullshit. So to come back to the point. So the starting point of true metaphysics on its practical side is self-observation in order to discover one's reactions to life. This discovery can be made only through an uncritical observation of his reactions to life. The sum total of these reactions defines the individual's state of consciousness. So what is Neville saying to us here? So self-observation has something to do. We don't want to observe how we look like. We don't want to observe what we do in our day-to-day life. We want to observe our reactions to life. Right? How do we react when someone is telling you money, when someone is telling you relationship, specific person, right? When someone is telling you health, when someone is telling you all of those buzzwords, so to say, then you have an automatic internal reactions. And if you encounter situations in your life, you have reactions when you talk to someone, when you see something, right? And those reactions, like Neville very wisely discovered, they determine in which state you live. And I also made a video called Infinite States. I can also link this above, because in there I really explain this in greater detail, that your reactions and stuff like that, they determine from where you come from which state of being you currently are. The easiest example I always give that, because that's the biggest one that I saw changes in my life recently, is like money, okay? I said this over and over again, but I hope you're not tired of this, but this is really true, right? When you think about money, when you look at your bank account and you get this anxious feeling, or you get this fear, or you go in the supermarket and you see something expensive and you're like, I can never afford this, then you have an automatic reaction to this. And this shows that you live obviously in a state of consciousness that has nothing to do with being financially free or having a lot of finances available, right? So self-observation is really about uncritically, right? We don't want to judge ourselves. We don't want to get down on ourselves or anything like that. We really want to just observe it, watch it, acknowledge it, being very uncritical, but realize those reactions in our life. Okay? And he continues and says, at this moment, try to notice your inner state. To what thoughts are you consenting? With what feelings are you identified? You must be ever careful where you are within yourself. Most of it think that we are kind and loving, generous and tolerant, forgiving and noble. But an uncritical observation of our reactions to life will reveal a self that is not at all kind and loving, generous or tolerant, forgiving and noble. And it is this self that we must first accept and then set about to change. So what is Neville telling us here? Again, first of all, he says that notice your inner state, right? Notice where you stand internally. Notice where you stand in consciousness. Notice like the thoughts you like on a consistent basis. Think about the feelings you have within you, because that determines your life. Not how you look like, not what you see when you look into the mirror. No, it is this internal state, right? That needs to be shifted, needs to be changed. And again, many people try this with some fancy techniques or try to change stuff at the surface level, but we want to dig deeper and change the core to see outer changes way more easier, okay? So this is the first point. And then he said most people, right, they think they are good people, so to say. They think that they are kind and loving or generous and stuff like that and noble, but really when they would look internally, right, they would see that they're the opposite, or that they're not near to be a noble and tolerant and generous and loving person, right? And you can figure this out when you just look at your reactions to life. And then he says, rebirth depends on inner work in one's self. No one can be reborn without changing this self. Any time that an internally new set of reactions enters into a person's life, a change of consciousness has taken place, a spiritual rebirth occurred. So many of you, when you read Neville's teachings, I'm sure you will be sometimes confused what he's talking about, like rebirth and dying to the old man, and does this mean? Like, do I have to die? Do I have to kill someone? No. Like, no. This means that your old state of being, what your old, like the sum total of your assumptions, your beliefs, your thoughts, and all of this stuff, right, died, and you have now a completely new one. In easy terms, people say like, tell a new story. This has something to do with this, but I see how Neville explains it, and like the state of consciousness shifting is way more deeper and gets down to the point. So spiritual rebirth just means that you shift out of your current reactions to life and your current perception, your current state, into a completely new one, right? But in order to do this, you first of all need to be aware in which state you are right now. And that is why, for example, in my 6-week coaching program, week 1 only deals with self-awareness, only deals with like realizing this awareness aspect that is there all the time and tapping more into that so that you actually can observe yourself better at any given moment. And then you will automatically be more relaxed, be more chilled. You're just more in the observer perspective and not in this ego, like oh my God, I need to do this and that kind of perspective. You're just more living from a true self, right? Which is this awareness part. So now I talked a lot, but this is self-observation. Okay, so you see, very crucial part. Observe uncritically your reactions and your internal state, and then you know where you're coming from. So let's continue with step 2, with the fundamental 2, which is definition of aim. And Neville says, having discovered through an uncritical observation of your reactions to life, you must now formulate an aim. That is, you must define the one you would like to be. With this aim clearly defined, you must, throughout your conscious waking day, notice your every reaction in regard to this aim. Okay, I will continue, then I'm going to explain that. So he says, the reason for this is that everyone lives in a definite state of consciousness, which state of consciousness we have already described as the sum total of his reactions to life. Therefore, in defining an aim, you are defining a state of consciousness, which, like all states of consciousness, must have its reactions to life. For example, if a rumor or an idle remark could cause an anxious reaction in one person and no reaction in another, this is positive proof that the two people are living in two different states of consciousness. That's straight to the point. Because like he said, every goal, right? When you define an aim, when you define a goal, when you define, okay, like I want to double my income, I want to just feel more fulfilled in my life, right? That's an valid desire, and it's very good. It actually happens automatically when you step a little bit more away from your ego all the time, and you step more in this watcher, observer, true self perspective, right? Which is behind all of the ego stuff. But also, like, that's an awesome goal. Or for example, you want to be with a partner. You have someone in your mind that you want to be with. You want to improve your relationship. You want to improve your life in general. You want to feel more excited by doing what you love, no matter what it is. Every desire is there for a reason, because it's like knocking on the door to show you what is already there. But like Neville said, this goal has a state of consciousness, and when you enter this new state, then you start to live from that state, and therefore you see more like things changing around you, things shifting around you, and you eventually like encountering this and manifesting this, right? Not out of thin air. It's just that you start to become more aware of something that already exists, right? That is what is meant by definition of aim. So when you define goal, notice that this goal actually already does exist, because creation is finished. Every state of consciousness, like I explained in this video about states before, is already there, and you can shift into it, right? And then he gave an example, and he said, for example, when you're walking with a friend and an accident happens, or it's just something happens, it doesn't need to be an accident for this example, but something happens, then you can be totally relaxed, and your friend can start to be totally anxious, totally upset, totally feared and worried. And alone this indicates that both people live in a different state. Just as an example, okay? And he also said, if you define your aim as noble, generous, secure, kindly individual, knowing all things are states of consciousness, you can easily tell whether you are faithful to your aim in life by watching your reactions to the daily events of life. If you are faithful to your ideal, your reactions will conform to your aim. For you will be identified with your aim, and therefore will be thinking from your aim, not of it. If your reactions are not in harmony with your ideal, it is a sure sign that you are separated from your ideal and you're only thinking of it. Assume that you are the loving one that you want to be, and notice your reactions throughout the day in regard to that assumption. Again, for your reactions will tell you the state from which you're operating. And I know, like, I'm repeating myself, and Neville also is repeating himself, but this is really only because I want you to get this point, right? It took me a while to figure out all of his teachings. It took me a while to really like connect the points and see what Neville is talking here. But when I finally did, all of this stuff made complete sense. And when it makes complete sense, then you understand it and you start to get results. So you see, when you define an aim, then do this, right? This is, like we talked about before, this is very important. And then you know that this is a state of consciousness, then you shift into it, you identify yourself with this new state, you assume it is already done, you assume that you are already this person, and then the more and more you do this, the more and more you will start to live from this new perspective, the more and more you will really realize, oh yeah, like I am already like more loving, more relaxed, more chilled, whatever. But this goes for everything, right? This goes for everything you actually want to achieve. This is the last step, the last fundamental, which is called detachment. Okay? We have self-observation, and we covered that. We have definition of aim, and now we have detachment. So this is where the third fundamental, detachment, enters in. Having discovered that everything is a state of consciousness made visible, and having defined that particular state which we want to make visible, we now set about the task of entering such a state. For we must move psychologically from where we are to where we desire to be. And this is exactly what I explain again and again and again in all of my teachings and also in my free masterclass. You will find the link below in the description, because that is what we want to do. That is really how life, manifesting, and reality and stuff like that works. Right? Everything is a state of consciousness, and currently you are in a certain state. Right? This is another word for that is the concept you have of yourself, your self-concept. Also a word that Neville uses very often, or your identity. Right? The version of yourself that you're identified with. This is responsible for your life, how your life unfolds, the circumstances you encounter, how you perceive them, what you manifest, and stuff like that. Right? The techniques you use, and they're only there to stabilize this, to shift you into this new state, into this new identity. But it's not the techniques, right, that are responsible for what unfolds and stuff like that. It is the core, right? So when you change this, right, when you shift into this new state, into this new self-concept, right, and you detach yourself, this is what detachment is, right? You detach yourself from that, you detach yourself from that old state, and you only start to be identified with this new state, even though your senses will deny it, even though you yourself will deny it, right? So it takes persistency in that new state, which is not hard work. It's very fun and playful and relaxed when you start to perceive it that way. So the purpose of practicing detachment is to separate us from our present reactions to life, right? Because let's look again at this picture, right? In this state, you have certain reactions. Okay, for example, you are here, and in this state, you are like you don't have the relationship you want, you don't have the finances you want, and you're unconfident, you have fears and doubts. You will be triggered when something's is happening on the outside. You will be triggered. You will have reactions. Whereas this version of yourself, which already has the goal, can't be triggered by this because it knows it is already done and it knows it is already true, right? So the purpose of practicing detachment is to separate us from our present reactions to life and attach us to our aim in life. This inner separation must be developed by practice, right? At first, we seem to have no power to separate ourselves from undesirable inner states, simply because we have always taken every mood, every reaction as natural and have become identified with them. And that happens when you're unaware. That happens when you're unconscious, when you live life on autopilot, when you don't upgrade to life, when you don't wake up and realize that you have the power, that you are literally, I don't say this to empower you, but that you are literally the operant power, right? Then this practice of detachment becomes easier. It becomes easier to detach yourself from those unwanted states, those unwanted reactions and stuff like that. When we have no idea that our reactions are only states of consciousness from which it is possible to separate ourselves, we go round and round in the same circle of problems, not seeing them as inner states, but as outer situations. We practice detachment or inner separation that we may escape from the circle of our habitual reactions to life. That is why we must formulate a name and constantly notice ourselves in regards to that aim. So I really hope you get this, right? I really, really hope you get this. I really hope that I got this point across, that to detach ourselves, right? We don't detach ourselves from circumstances or stuff like that. Right? This happens automatically, but we detach ourselves internally from this old state, from this version of ourselves that we don't want to be any longer. And again, in my free masterclass, I explain to you what is the difference between people that get results with all of this stuff and people that don't get results with that. So check it out. And I want to summarize all of that so that you have some takeaways from this video and you will be able to understand those fundamentals and also apply them in your life. This teaching begins with self-observation, right? Step number 1. Secondly, it asks, what do you want? Which is step number 2, right? Definition of aim. And then it teaches detachment from all negative states and attachment to the aim. Attachment to this new state of consciousness, thinking from this point of view of this new version of yourselves. This last state, right, attachment to aim, is accomplished by frequently assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Because the more and more you do that, right, the more, whenever you have doubts and fears and worries, you have the ability to use your imagination to experience your end result already being done. And therefore, like, shifting into this feeling of the wish is already fulfilled. And therefore, you attach yourself to that aim. So we must practice separating ourselves from our negative moods and thoughts in the midst of all troubles and disasters of daily life. No one can be different from what he is now unless he begins to separate himself from his present reactions and to identify himself with his aim. Detachment from negative states and assumption of the wish fulfilled must be practiced. And now is the final word. We must constantly practice self-observation, thinking from our aim, and detachment from negative moods and thoughts if we would be doers of the truth instead of mere hearers. Which means if you are a hearer of all of that, if you listen to my voice, if you watch this video until now, and you think, yeah, like all of this sounds great, cool, and then you go back to like not observing yourself, being unconscious and living in your old undesirable states, then your circumstances will never change. So you must start to become a doer of this truth. Right? Neville doesn't even call it like a tip or stuff like that. He calls it the truth, because that is really how it works. So apply that, right? Apply those 3 steps. Keep those 3 fundamentals in your mind. By now, you know like what the law of assumption is about. It's about those 3 steps. And with that, you will be able to achieve your goals way better. If you have questions, feel free to leave them at the comments. I love to talk with you there. So just share your feedback, share your thoughts, share your questions. And I talk to you in the next video. See you guys. Bye.